Praise the Lord. We're going to read Genesis 32:13 to 23. Jacob sets the tone for a meeting with Esau. And he lodged there that same night, and took of that which came to his hand a present for Esau his brother, 200 she-goats and 20 he-goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milch camels with their colts, 40 kine, and 10 bulls, 20 she-asses, and 10 foals. And he delivered them into the hand of his servants, every drove by themselves. And said unto his servants, Pass over before me, and put a space betwixt drove and drove. And he commanded the foremost, saying, When Esau my brother meeteth thee, and asketh thee, saying, Whose art thou, and whither goest thou? And whose are these before thee? Then thou shalt say, They be thy servant Jacob's. It is a present sent unto my lord Esau. And behold, also he is behind us. And so commanded he the second and the third, and all that followed the droves, saying, On this manner shall ye speak unto Esau when ye find him. And say ye, moreover, Behold, thy servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with the present that goeth before me, and afterward I will see his face. Peradventure he will accept of me. So went the present before over him, and himself lodged that night in the company. And he arose up that night, and took his 2 wives, and his 2 women servants, and his 11 sons, and passed over the ford Jabbok. And he took them, and sent them over the brook, and sent over that he had. Again, reading verse number 13, it says, And he lodged there that same night, and took of that which came to his hand a present for Esau his brother. Jacob had made preparations for encountering his brother. News that Esau was coming with 400 men, of course, was not setting well with Jacob. Thus he had planned to make it better for Esau to accept him. He wished to provide to Esau a gift, or we can say many gifts. Was it within Jacob's mind to provide these gifts for his brother beforehand, that is, before he heard the news about his brother Esau coming with 400 men? The text does not provide us with any idea of Jacob providing a gift to Esau, his brother, before he had heard the news of 400 men coming with Esau. It was only after that Esau was bringing 400 men to Jacob's family members. Then Jacob prepared gifts. It's like almost in the mind of Jacob rather than in the mind of Esau, for we don't know. Jacob had thought, well, I guess I have to give him a bribe or something like that. With that said, the plan of the enemy is always to steal, kill, and destroy. But the plans of the people of God should be to give. When the enemy ramps up his plans to destroy the people of God should be giving, even though things looked very dire in the eyes of Jacob. Even though Esau was really not the enemy of Jacob, but he didn't know what his brother was planning. They were brothers. Still, the thoughts of Jacob were not thoughts of peace that was coming into his mind. Had Jacob not known about Esau's plans when he had left to go to Haran, that meeting might have been very different. In fact, had Jacob not known Esau's plan to kill him, Jacob may not have planned to confront Esau with gifts and so on. And the plans of Esau might have been intact to kill his own brother. Of course, we don't know. Gifts from Jacob could have changed Esau's heart a bit if his heart was with bad intentions in it. Though it is not certain, only God will be able to tell us the real intent of Esau's heart once he heard that Jacob was coming. It seemed like an instant thing, getting 400 people ready and going. It could be said that 20 years without seeing Jacob might have changed his heart towards his brother. We are not given his inner thoughts, as the Bible does not really provide it. In prayer, though, we do share with God our inner thoughts. Thus, if people are praying in the Bible and their words are mentioned, it could show their inner thoughts and their turmoil, likened unto David when he had run from Saul. Time and again he met up with anguish deep inside of his soul. Without him praying, the reader would be left without those words of turmoil. Furthermore, as people read the prayers of David as he shares his inner turmoil, it provides people with that to compare their own trials and tribulations and look to get help and comfort from God, as that is a way to express our turmoil in our prayers, knowing that God can intercede and help us. Yet with people such as Esau, who may not have learned the ways of his father Isaac and building altars to God and praying, Esau is not found with that type of relationship either, as a person of prayer to God. However, Jacob did latch onto that type of custom to learn to sacrifice to God and to pray to God. Thus, we hear more from those who prayed in the Bible and shared their prayers to God. That brings out the thoughts, rather than providing only that which happened and not the inner thoughts of the people. The inner thoughts, therefore, are within those prayers that the people of God offer up to him. Verse 14 says, 200 she-goats and 20 he-goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams. In one sense, we do get a sense of generosity from Jacob towards his brother. Jacob had no need really to go all out and provide a very, very, very big blessing to Esau, his brother. This is different from before, when he was at home and Esau needed food, but Jacob encouraged his own brother to sell his birthright to him. For that, it was encouragement to do the wrong thing at the wrong timing. A time when Esau was extremely faint and weak. It was not the picture of a brother in the idea of helping his own brother out. We say, at least Paul said, that we should help our family members. But here, it seems like he was taking advantage of his weak brother. It was quite the opposite of what Christianity should do today, of not taking advantage of one another's weakness and exploiting that weakness to one's own advantage. In the sense of might equals right, or viewing someone's weak points to take advantage of them, is not the way Christians should act. Instead, we are people who are to help others and uphold our brothers or those people that are in need. That is the sense of what Christ had come to do for us, for he knew that all of the others, of course, were weaker than he in a spiritual way, but he did not exploit their weaknesses. For the woman who was caught in adultery, Jesus did not exploit that weakness in her, but he had forgiven her and offered her life. And that is what forgiveness does for people. It offers them a new opportunity, a new advantage, and does not take advantage of their weaknesses. Jacob may have been a changed person, returning to the land of his nativity, for he was awakened by the fear of death or revenge, in one sense. But he was treated so harshly by Laban beforehand. That did not settle well with Jacob, and he had had enough of being treated harshly. From going out of Laban's grasp, Jacob comes, we could say, into the grasp of his own brother. who could have done the same, but Esau had chosen not to, whether it was the hand of God or whether it was the hand and influence of Jacob's turn from trying to take from his brother to give to his brother, or just the fact that Esau missed his brother for a period of 20 years, that is the question. The truth is, though, Esau seemed changed too, as well as Jacob. They needed each other. It could have been that Esau was wishing to help his own brother out, while Jacob thought or was thinking the worst of him. Thus, if we think of gifts given to one's own brother, these gifts were the finest that a brother could ever have given. There is not another gift giving like it in the Old Testament, likened unto an individual giving to another individual. Jacob wanted to show a change in his behavior. Before, he was out to steal from his brother, even lying and deceiving his own father. But then he had come out of hardship with Laban, learned it is better to give than to receive, to give than to take. This example from Jacob to his own family members was a powerful example. Even though it did come from one who was trying to persuade Esau to not take his life and those of his family members, it still showed great kindness in his heart to give, even though this gift-giving was not to God. It was something that was meant as a means to change the relationship that seemed so broken so many years ago. Thus, what was given here in this verse portrays 200 female goats. The she-goats are applicable to female in our modern way of writing it, rather than she-goats. Then, in just in contrast to the she-goats, one sees the he-goats, or, in another way to say it, male goats. Thus, for those, he had given only 20 in comparison to 200 female goats. The 200 ewes, which are already female, these are mature female sheep. Thus, so far there are goats and sheep being given to Esau. Then, Jacob had given 20 rams, which are male sheep, mature. Thus, for the goats, it was 200 female to 20 male, and the same for the sheep. The males were given to Esau a lot less in quantity or number, but the females were given much more in quantity. So one would question, why was it that Jacob had given so many more female animals to Esau than male ones? Jacob, since he had worked with animal groups, for such a long time, he must have understood which ones were the better gifts. Males were not so necessary, for the females would be the ones that would carry the next generation. But the males could impregnate a greater number of females, and males generally fought one against another for dominance, I suppose. Thus, with the greater number given to Esau that were female ones, that was a very, we could say, intelligent gift from Jacob, and one that was ready to please Esau, even though we know not Esau's intention, but it did probably help the relationship. Esau had even said that he could keep them for himself, but Jacob insisted on Esau taking them. Thus, in the end, Esau did take them. Verse 15 says, 30 milch camels with their colts, 40 kine, and 10 bulls, 20 she-asses, and 10 foals. The 30 milch camels are female, used for their milk production. The colts were provided along with their mothers instead of separate from them, so that they would, of course, grow with that bond towards their mothers, and their mothers would not be separated from them. Thus, the mothers and their babies were kept together. Thus there were 30 milch camels and 30 colts. Then there were the 40 kine. Kine is a plural word for cows or cattle. With the 40 kine, there were also 10 bulls that were provided. Fewer males than females, again, for more generosity towards peace than with fewer males. The 20 she-asses are 20 female donkeys, as we would say them today. The 10 foals are the younger donkeys given, who also had their mother with them. In total, 580 animals, which one could say was an agricultural empire gift. This was the type that kings would give to other kings, but this was simply Jacob giving them to his brother. Such an enormous gift to a brother was unheard of, and the biggest gift by a brother or an individual gift in the Bible itself. There was no other such gift presented by an individual to another individual. This gift goes beyond, and it even was a sacrifice for Jacob to give it to Esau. Even though Jacob had taken the firstborn rights and was given the blessing that should have been for Esau, this gift was essentially very kind of Jacob, for it showed his earnestness to heal the wound that had been festering for some time in Esau, and for what Jacob had irreverently done to his own brother. Of course, Jacob did want his family preserved too, and with such a great, enormous gift, Esau's heart could have been softened. But in all reality, he probably did not want to harm his own brother from the beginning. He might have just traveled with a band of men to protect himself and others whom he had traveled with. Besides, he was offering Jacob's family their protection, but Jacob had not accepted it. Verse 16 says, "And he delivered them into the hand of his servants, every drove by themselves, and said unto his servants, Pass over before me, and put a space betwixt drove and drove." Jacob wanted these droves to come in different groups, so that Esau would meet one group, then the next, and the servant would say that it was a gift for Esau. Thus, with so many gifts from Jacob to Esau, it was a way of saying that Jacob was sorry for what he had done in the past, that he might be reconciled to his brother and allowed passage along with his family to reunite with his own dad, too. For his dad, Isaac, as far as we know, had not even known that Jacob was coming. What was in the mind of Isaac, that he would ever see Jacob again? Once he had heard, of course, it must have been his delight to see him again. But, of course, one knows that Isaac had his favorite already, Esau, with him all of that time. So the record of Isaac meeting Jacob again was not even mentioned in the Bible. And the timing of Isaac's knowledge of him coming to the land of Canaan was not mentioned either. Jacob's instructions were specific as to what the servants were to do and say once Esau had met them. They were to put a space between the droves and then have them say to Esau that they were gifts for him. Verse 17 says, "And he commanded the foremost, saying, When Esau my brother meeteth thee, and asketh thee, saying, Whose art thou? And whither goest thou? And whose are these before thee? The servant that Jacob had placed at the furthest in the front to meet Esau first was instructed carefully and intentionally, after Esau had asked the question about whose he was, where he was going, and whose those were. Of course, the servant would provide exactly the answer that Jacob had instructed him to say, which was the right answer. For Jacob, it was his kind reassurance that hopefully his brother would accept him again. Verse 18 says, Then thou shalt say, They be thy servant Jacob's, it is a present sent unto my lord Esau, and behold, he is behind us. The emphasis was that they were Jacob's own, but as a gift given to Esau. The servants must have been awed with such a quantity of animals given to Esau, for it had not been given likened unto that before. Even within the biblical account, it was not provided that someone had given so much before. Jacob's gifts stands out as a generous gift or gifts that was not written about likened unto one individual unto another in the entire Bible. Verse 19 says, And so commanded he the second and the third and all that followed the droves, saying, On this manner shall ye speak unto Esau when ye find him. The first received the news of what to say, but so did the others too. Instead of just one gift, it was likened unto receiving gift after gift from Jacob to Esau. Esau was probably awed himself that his brother had given him so many animals. Esau may have been a bit confused, but awed at what his brother had done by giving so many animals like that. Those commands from Jacob were essential for Esau to hear that Jacob was giving and not taking, likened unto the past. In other words, the past was no longer going to be in the present for taking. Instead, his goal was to give, not only to God, but also to his brother whom he had defrauded. Verse 20 says, And say ye moreover, Behold, thy servant Jacob is behind us, for he said, I will appease him with the present that goeth before me, and afterward I will see his face. Peradventure he will accept of me. Here is where it seems that Jacob might have shared his concerns with his servants and the needfulness of explaining it in such a way as he did. He wanted them to say that he himself was behind them so that Esau could meet Jacob after he had met all the gifts of animals that he was to receive of Jacob. Jacob, with all the droves of gifts, he still was unsure that Esau would accept him in the end. However, he thought it might just work, though, and that is what he was counting on, for it to work. He definitely, though, put his best effort to make it pleasing for Esau, and that Esau would not harm him, nor any of his family members, for they were very extremely meaningful to him. Verse 21 says, So went the present over before him, and himself lodged that night in the company. Thus it seems that Jacob had prepared it well, as he had mentioned it to the servants, so the present, as it is in the animals, went on before him. So he himself, along with the rest, stayed and lodged in the company of all. But the presents were sent before him. Of course, nothing had happened to the gift of animals before Esau had come upon them. That was the good thing, that it did happen as planned by Jacob. Verse number 22 says, And he rose up that night, and took his 2 wives, and his 2 women servants, and his 11 sons, and passed over the ford Jabbok. That particular night, though, he may not have been so keen on sleeping it through. He may have had trouble sleeping. He probably did not know exactly what timing Esau was to come upon him and his family members, but the gifts were on their way, which made him maybe a bit more at ease. Then, taking his wives along with his women servants and his children, and that probably a large number, finally passed through the ford Jabbok. That is, if it is a river type that is wide enough, not narrow enough that one can jump over it, but it does say that he passed over the ford Jabbok. Now, does it really mean that he had some kind of bridge to go over, or did they have to go through it? It doesn't mention him, of course, making a bridge, but that doesn't mean that he did not make a bridge. And if all of the animals or whatever, but of course, one has to think about whether or not they would be safe going through the ford Jabbok, and it seemed like it was more narrow than a full river, so he probably did go through it, even though it does say passed over. So Jabbok was a river that he had passed through or over in that case, and then on the other side, of course, he would meet the angel that he would wrestle with. In verse 23 it says, "And he took them and sent them over the brook, and sent over that he had." The brook was not quite a full river, but it was a smaller one. It's brook. Brook is narrower. Yet he sent all his over that brook. And there he was going to meet, finally, his brother after 20 long years. May God bless you today. In Jesus' name.